Alright, so this is a video going over how to assemble your parallax assignment and then animate all the pieces. So I'm in my bird, all the pieces are rigged. Um, so I have that tattoo shape I could change. I have my squashing, my stretching. I do need, there it is, feather position, good. I do need to take this bird controller, which is this null right here. I do need to place that right at the bottom of my bird. So I'm going to put that right there. And then I'm going to parent my bird to that. So I'm going to make sure both these are 3D. Parent this to that. And so now, oops, if I go to the position, I can move them left and right. I can move it up and down. I can, move it forward and backward. Okay. So I'm just going to save. And then Vanilla Bird 2, I'm going to say animatable bird. Make a couple folders. And I'm just going to drop in all the stuff that I don't need. There we go. Let's pull that out. Oops. Don't break. Yeah, that's fine for now. I can just pull it out after. There we go. And now I should be able to pull this out of there. Good. Okay, so now this is my one I'm going to animate, bring into the other one. I'm going to go into my environment. And this is all set up here. I'm going to just make a couple folders. Comps. Let's rename this one background scene. I don't have any other comps right now. Video and artwork. So let's drop the background layers into artwork, drop the video into video, and I can put this comp into here. Okay, so I'm going to save, and then I'm just going to import file, and then find my scene, find my bird, and then import this as a project, and then hit import. So now I should get this folder. It's taking a second. There we go. You may need to, if you're switching between partners and stuff, if you have artwork that is, text-based, you may have to exchange fonts. You may also have to create outlines depending on how you want to do that. Here's my animatable bird. So I'm just going to double-click. That brings up my bird here. So I'm just going to copy these two layers, go into my background scene, and then paste those two layers. And let me turn off some of these things I don't need right now, like those birds I have in the background. Let's move this up to the top. There we go. And then we just place him. So anything I do, I'm never going to touch this vanilla bird. So I can lock that. And my bird controller is something I want to adjust. So I'm going to go to my bird controller. I'm going to go to his position. Oops, just regular position. And then I'm going to move him into position. Now I did animate this camera. I'll get into how I did that. But he's going to be on this platform here. So I want to line him up with that platform, which is background 2 or foreground 2. So if I look at the Z space here, 2084, and I set this to 2084, that will get him on the same plane as that. And then I can use the position for this. There he is. And the Y position right there. And so now you'll see that he's like stuck to that spot. Okay. If he wasn't lined up, he would look like he's parallaxed and not following it. Okay, obviously he's a bit big, so I'm going to go to scale, and I'll scale him down. And this is, again, kind of the reason we put the pivot at the bottom. It makes it easier for us to move him back and forth. Okay. And I'm just kind of looking at my camera to see if I like that movement. I think I want to scale him down just a smidge more. All right, that feels like a good scale for him to be in the scene. Okay. Now, you probably didn't have any animation on your camera yet, so I'll show you how you can animate the camera. Remember, we have an animated camera here. This is an actual camera we made under Layers New Camera. Oops. We have a background controller, and that's what's going to be used to animate the camera. So inside here I have camera position, I have camera rotate, and I have camera rotate. So if I just look at my keyframes here, I set an initial keyframe to be out here, and then I went in to this point and kind of lined up my shot there. Then I went into that point and lined up my shot there. Okay, so let's delete the keyframes. Whoops. There we go. And I'm going to go to, I'll just delete all, stop grabbing the wrong thing. Alright, so I'm going to animate camera position, rotate, and rotate. And I'm going to go up, let's say 5 seconds. And I'm going to push my camera into the scene. So this is going to go straight through. Ideally, I would have this, first foreground that kind of like reveals there's a bird there. Okay, so I want to get somewhat close to him so I get more of an effect on there. Now let's scoot my camera over. A quick key, if you hold shift as you're dragging, it'll go a bit quicker. Okay, so I'm basically establishing what my shot's going to be, the starting point. I may want to do a little rotation here, that might be kind of cool. And a little rotation maybe this way also. Okay, I'm very aware of my corners, making sure that I don't rotate too far and see, that stuff. I don't want that. Alright, so now this is what we have, and you'll see there's a moment where it kind of cuts through that first one. Okay, your camera move can be not anything, it has to be some kind of movement that works with the animation, but just keep in mind that it should feel nice and feel part of it. I'm going to animate the camera moving up now. And then I'm going to animate it angling up. And give this maybe a little bit more room. Let's see what that looks like. There we go. Now as it gets over here, so as it gets like up there, let me just set a key in my rotate X. I'm going to delete that key. And then I'm going to scoot up to here. And then I'm going to rotate my camera down. That way the camera looks like it's kind of flying over and then angling up. Okay, so now it's angling up a little bit and then rounding about. Now there is a little bit of a hiccup there. It's not nice and smooth. There's a very obvious change in direction. So I do want to grab all of these, and I do want to right click and do my easy ease. And I'll take a look. Alright, now that he's satisfied with that easy ease, let's undo that. I'm going to still do the easy ease. I'm going to go into my graph editor, and this time I'm going to right click and stay in the value graph. Because what I want to do is go into each one of these and just ensure that this graph is flowing nicely. You'll see here this is going easing out and then getting into this mode and then like slowing down and then doing that again. So I don't want that to happen. What I want to do is I'm going to click on my handles here. Oh, G. I'm going to click and drag on my handle. Come on. Why is not letting me see my handles? Keyframe interpolation. Alright, it's not letting me see my handles. I have something not clicked somewhere. But anyway, I found a different way I can do this. If I grab this and hit the auto continue or the continuous Bezier, that will smooth it out. Okay, so that helps that. I'm going to go here and we'll do the same thing. See, this one has the handles, and I can obviously adjust them. I can hit G, hold down Alt, drag out the handle if I need to, or hit V, grab the handle, or hit the continuous, and then I can adjust those there. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just kind of adjusting these handlebars to kind of smooth out the transition of that rotation. Now let's see if that looks any better. Now, the video that you're seeing is not real time, like when you're watching it, because it does skip some frames. But that looks pretty good. I like how it comes up, and we see the guy right there. Okay. So now I'm going to scoot up to maybe 20 seconds or so. And I'm going to slide my camera over to the right. I'm going to try to go as far as I can, and then rotate my camera facing the other way. I'll also rotate this down some. Okay, so this is basically giving me a path for my Angry Bird to travel on. So let's see what that looks like as one whole piece. Good, it kind of slows down a little bit to give us a little bit of time for the bird to start moving. And that feels pretty good. Now, I haven't animated the bird at all yet because I really want to block out the camera move. And once the camera move is established, then I can see, you know, does it make sense of how the bird is moving. I think I also want to change the color of the bird just so he pops a little bit more. So I'm just going to go to my vanilla bird here. Go to my hue and my color correction. There you are. Hue and saturation. And I'm just sliding him over to a different color. Actually, maybe I'll just brighten him up some. There we go. And I'll adjust these colors afterwards. I just want to have a little bit more representation on screen as I'm looking at him to be able to see him. Because when he's here, this green is a little bit too close to that green. And he's not popping the way I want him to. Okay, so that feels pretty good. So he comes up over there. There's our bird. The clouds are moving. Eventually I have birds flying by. And then he would start to move along this plane. Okay, and if we zoom in, you can see this is still nice and crisp. Because of the resolution that we set up, all of our details are still here, even on my bird. Right there, his details are still nice. Now he is getting cut off, it looks like. Let's jump into his composition here. Yep, he definitely is getting cut off. You can see his feathers there. So I'm just going to go to his comp settings. I can take this lock off and just change the height. There we go. And then jump back to my background scene. That pops in. Maybe lock him again because he's good. My bird controller is still at the bottom. Alright, so everything should be good. Alright, so I'm going to save this. So I will say Sarcona, Parallax, Animated. Okay, so my camera is animated, my background elements are animated. If I decided to change the speed of the clouds, any of that stuff, obviously I have that background controller to do that, to go into my cloud speed and maybe slow them down or speed them up, like we talked about when we were talking about the rigging. Okay, or if I want to jump into the other stuff and play with that, I can do that as well. Cool. So let's go to the bird, and all of these we keep exactly here at the start. Don't move any of these down because that could screw up some of the stuff. Okay, so just keep everything right where it is. Realistically, any of these things now we shouldn't really need to be needing to touch. If we wanted to hide them, we can just add the little shy guy to it and hit the shy guy here. And it'll just hide those things so that they're still there, they're still visible in the scene. We just don't have to bother with seeing them down here. Even the camera null, we don't really use this, so I could shy guy him. The animated camera, we don't need that. The birds in the background, I can just turn them on, I guess, and then hide them. Oops, actually make them 3D first and then hide them. My vanilla bird, oops, let's unlock that. I can just shy guy him as well. Okay, so now I'm really only left with the two things that I am animating. The background's done animating for right now, so I'm just going to lock that so I don't accidentally control it. And then the bird is everything else. So I'm just going to sync this up so that my camera comes in, kind of pauses here for a second, and then now my bird is going to start bouncing along the ground. So I'm going to need position. Get the hair off my keyboard. It's like stuck under my cover, I guess. You don't have to do that, hopefully. All right, so he's going to start animating, right? And the timing of the camera is going to help guide us in that. So I'm going to go to position, and I'm going to break this down into a very simple method of animating. So position here, I'm going to go up to, let's say, 10. I'll scoot him forward. Okay, so this was about 2.5, 3 seconds for him to move from A to B. And let's go another 3 seconds. I'll scoot him forward again. Okay, now I'm going to undo this, but I want you to see why I'm going to undo it. If I constantly just do this, where I'm moving this and then moving the bird, there's no real timeline as far as how fast he's moving. So he could move like really fast between these two keyframes, then really slow, and then really fast, and then really slow. It looks like he's running at an actual pretty easy pace here. It looks like he did hit something like a little bit slower right there. What I can do is if I just delete these middle ones, and I just have the start, I'm going to turn this off too. If I just have the start one, and I have the end one, now he's running at a consistent speed. And so now I can just go through and just put in extra keyframes every little bit. Okay, just kind of breaking up where each one of these are. And these are going to be, in my case, where he's going to be bouncing into the scene. Okay, I'm going to zoom in. And I'm just going to give myself a little bit more time for him to be on the ground. The first one doesn't matter because I have all this space beforehand where he is on the ground. This one, though, I don't want him just to like hit the ground and move away. I'm actually going to copy this keyframe, zoom in. I'm going to go, let's say, another frame afterwards, and then just paste it. Okay, I'll do the same thing here. Copy, paste. And all this does is just gives our bird a little bit more time to be on the ground. If we rush it too much, it's going to look like he's, you know, he's crazy. We don't want to look crazy. All right. All right, so now he hasn't bounced, obviously, so we need to get him to bounce. So I'm going to go into my controller here, and I'm just going to go between the two keyframes and just lift him up. And you'll see now we're going to get this bounce. We'll go here, lift him up. We'll go here, lift him up. Go there, lift him up. Okay, now if we hit play, he's not going to look very bouncy. He's going to look kind of like wavy. Okay, so we need to fix that. Let me take this down to a third just to speed up my previews a little bit more. There we go. Okay, so that doesn't look very good. So I'm going to go to where he is up in the air. I'm going to click on the path, and you'll see that we have these handles. If I go to my pen tool and I drag the handle, I should be able to angle this up. There you go. Now remember here I have 2 points because I duplicated it. So one of these handles is the correct one, whoops, and then the other one is not. Okay, the other one does that. So I have to be very careful of how I grab those. Okay, so I'm also holding down Alt just to verify that I grab the handle correctly. Nope, that was the right one the first time. There we go. Final one right there. All right. There we go. So now it looks like he's actually like hitting the ground. Okay. He might be moving a little bit too slow, so I'm going to just grab the keyframes here and just start to like squish them in a little bit more. Okay. The way that they're set up, and it's hard to see from being zoomed out so far, but there's one keyframe here, one keyframe there, there's two here, one here, two here, one there, two, one, one, okay? So I'm just being aware of that and just kind of making sure that everything stays centered with where it should. There we go. So that feels better. He's also like more centered in the screen. Alright, now this one here, I think this one, if you look at the dots, the spacing on these dots and the dots before this are pretty consistent. When we get to this is a lot more packed, okay? So that is this here. So I'm going to grab these keyframes. Whoops, too far. And the dots just mean that it goes a lot faster. So I'm just pushing those closer together and pushing these closer together, and that will spread the dots out a bit more. Do the same thing here, same thing there. All right, now this is pretty boring. Like, he is definitely bouncing the assignments there, but holy cow, it's just putting me to sleep. I need to have a little bit more pizzazz, a little bit more action going on, so I'm going to speed this up quite a bit. Even though this is like a second and a half, that's way too long. So let's take just our first bounce here and drag that back and see how that looks. Much more impactful. Boom. Right, maybe even a little bit more. There we go. Cool, I like the way that looks. So now I'm just going to mimic that spacing with the rest of them. And again, I can look at those dots as my guide to how well they're going to relate. If one has really tight dots and one has really loose dots, then that means that one bounce is going to seem a lot faster than the other ones, or a lot slower than the other ones. The dots represent keyframes, and as we move animate frames, and as we adjust our spacing of frames, or of keyframes here, it's controlling where he's at. Ooh, and now he's off the screen. Okay, so now I need to unlock my background controller, grab my camera stuff, and I just need to grab these end keyframes and just pull these in a bit more. Okay, and I'll know where to go because there he is. Okay, and it's fine for him to stop bouncing and the camera to still continuously move, right? It's kind of like setting the stage, like we're done now. All right, so that looks pretty good. Let's rewind this a bit and see. So it comes in. Oops, my camera moved a little bit too much. Let's pull him back so that he actually animates a little bit sooner. Okay, now he's getting ahead of the camera, so we're just going to play this game where we speed up the camera. As long as you have control over those keyframes and you know what they're for, this part is not terribly difficult. You'll see all I did is set some position keyframes, and then I did that. That's pretty decent right there. Alright, that feels good. Let's go in here and add some other stuff. So I'm just going to zoom in. And this is where we're going to start to add a lot more keyframes. So I'm going to lock my background again because I'm done with that. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to, before he jumps, he should be doing a couple different things. One of them he should be doing is he should be kind of like rolling back and then rotating into it. Okay, so I'm going to do that. So I'm going to go to rotate. Okay, not that way. And probably not this way. Nope. But this way. Okay, so I'm going to leave my Z rotation on. I'm going to Shift P to grab that up. And I'll zoom in. Okay, and I'm going to set my rotation keyframe before this. Now I have to set one to start. So just like the other ones, I want this to happen kind of quick, but I'll have to adjust my spacing to see. So here he's going to be regular. then he'll be back. Probably this will be back a little bit. So he's going to go. Okay. Now when he gets to this point, I want him to be facing pretty much straight up and down. Okay. I think even when he gets past this like that, I think I want him to be facing even the other direction. Right. Let's slow that down a little bit more. There we go. So it feels like he's kind of flinging himself forward. Okay, so he flings himself forward. There he goes. I think that one needs to come a little bit quicker. Okay, there's no exact spot to put keyframes. It's just a matter of being able to look at them and adjust them so they feel like they make sense. There we go. Okay, now when he comes down here, okay, and he's about to hit the ground, I want him to be in that backwards position again. So I'm going to rotate him back again. And when he gets here, past this, I want him facing the other way. And then when he gets to the top of the hill, I want it back to 0. Right? So it feels like the guy is actually like putting in some effort. He's not just like bouncing. He's actually like thrusting his body in this bouncing fashion. He looks so delicate, but yeah, that's what he's doing. Okay, so let's rewind him here. We'll go past it a little bit, throw him forward. And again, you'll see this same pattern over and over again. Even when you go into 3D animation, when we get to bouncing ball, you'll see this exact same animation effect. I'm kind of lowering the amount at the end because he has a little bit more momentum. So I'm not going, crazy on that. Oops, why? Pull that back some. And then when he hits the ground here, I'm going to toss him forward a little bit. And then go into the negative a little bit. And then reset him back to 0. Okay, and this gives him a little bit of an overshoot. There we go. And he just feels more alive. It feels more realistic when we do these kinds of things. It's obviously more work, sure, but that's how we get it to look so good. And that's what people pay us for, is doing this kind of stuff. He's so adorable. Okay, now notice everything I've done is a layering process. I did the background, I set up the camera, made sure that worked. Then I jumped to the bird controller and I made sure that he was in a good spot. I animated just his X position left and right. Made sure that was good. Then I went to the Y position. Once I was good with that, I adjusted some of the timing of those things, fixed the camera. Then I came back and did the Z rotation. Okay, so all of these things add up to what the end result will look like. All right, so now I'm just going to go to the next thing, the next layer. And that next layer is going to be adding some squashy and some stretchy. Okay, I haven't touched any of my other stuff. I have a bunch of controls here I'll get to, but I don't want to do that until I do my squash and stretch. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to scoot that down. Okay, now we're going to deal with the same kind of thing. Before he gets into that big jump here, he's going to be squashed down. So anytime we squash, we do two things. One, we make sure these are tied together. Somehow those became disconnected, so let me double check. Yeah, it works there. Why isn't it working in the other one? Let me double check. So every once in a while you'll get something that just gets disconnected for some reason. Even my feathers don't want to move. It is possible I moved my layer. No, that's still there. Let me go into, yeah, I'm just going to squash him like crazy and then go into this. Still good. Go into this. He's still good. Alright, so let me just lock this. Let me jump to my vanilla bird. Let me go back to where I told it to squash. Feather, no. Beak, no. Skin, there we go. Okay, so this is comp animatable bird layer blah blah blah. Alright, so I just need to reconnect that. That should have updated, but it didn't. So it's not a big deal. I just have to rename this animatable bird and call this background scene. And you'll see that as I start typing that in, that would then pop up into that list. There he is. Alright, so let me go back to squash and reset that. Oops, to 100. Reset that to 100, and that's good. Okay. And while I'm here, I'm assuming that all the other stuff will also be like that. Okay, so I'm just going to highlight where it says animatable bird and just call this background scene. And I'm just going to hit E on these, and that will bring up all my expressions, making it a lot easier to do this. Oops. Obviously this takes a minute, but it takes a lot less time because we had someone else rig the rest of this for us. Now we could have also copied and pasted from our environment, put that in there, but we would probably run into the same issue. Obviously this is good to see because as you work with other clients and that kind of thing, that you will run into these issues. And it's just a matter of being able to troubleshoot all that stuff. Alright, so it looks like everything's good. Make sure I save, come back to this. Alright, so there, that works, and that works. Alright, so back to where we were. Let's go back here. Okay, so he's here. Right here he should be squashed. Okay, so I need to go back a frame, set some squash and stretch sliders. Go up to this frame. I'm going to squash him outward and stretch him down. Ignore the eyes, ignore the beak, ignore the feathers. Okay. Okay, and then once he gets to about here, he's going to be the opposite. He's going to be squished inwards and stretched outwards. Okay, so now we're going to have the same kind of setup that I did on the other one, where he gets to the top, and these numbers are just going to reset themselves back to 100. So he's back to being round. And then when we get down to the bottom here, right before he hits that bottom, he's going to be squished in and stretched out. He hits the bottom, and he's going to go the other way. Okay, we go up a couple frames after that. Stretched out again. He goes back to the top. He's back to 100. Every time that he bounces, he is going to squish down and be flat like a pancake. And every time he's like in the air jumping, he's going to be stretched out. Okay, so we're almost at the ground, so stretch. He hits the ground. and squash. A couple frames after. Now, you definitely could have copied and pasted keyframes, but I'm doing this so that you can see this process. So if your bird is one who is obviously, you know, moving around, you want these things to be there, because this is what's going to make your bird look realistic. Or at least make the animation of the bird look realistic. Here I'm just going to put them back to 100 so we can do a little wobble. Alright, so now let's rewind that and just take a look at what that looks like. Save. Okay, definitely a lot more lively, a lot more motion in them. Okay, now I didn't even animate the pupils. Those are just where they're positioned and how they're kind of bouncing around or appearing to bounce around because his skin is like stretching out. Okay, now this is where we want to get the squishing and squashing and stretching and all that stuff done here, so that once we're happy with this, then we can animate the other things. Okay, so now I'm going to go back, grab my bird controller again, go back to the beginning of the animation. And then at this point I can do the pupils, I can do the beak position, whatever I want to do. Just tackle them one at a time. So let me zoom in again. Let's go to here. Okay, pupils are in a good spot. You can see there they're kind of like, you know, above his eyes, which is kind of weird. So here they're good, so I'm just going to set a keyframe there. Those are good. I'm going to go up here, and let me just hit U so I can see the pupils here. Maybe I don't want to set those there. I know I probably do. I will see. All right. It's always a, you know, a game you're going to play with, you know, seeing what After Effects can do to make everything happy. Okay. I think what I'll do is I'll go to the top peaks of all of these and just set the keyframes there, because I know that those spots, his pupils should be lined up perfectly. All right, there we go. And then way at the end, lock those in again. Okay, so his pupils are lined up. Okay, you see lots of keyframes already. So now let's get this thing set up so that it makes more sense. So here he's good. I think maybe I do want to adjust. You see with them both selected, I can move both pupils at the same time. There you go. So now he's looking up. I think before this I'm going to come in and just reset these to 0. That way it's like, it's kind of like looking up at that. Okay, and then right here, we'll still have them both selected. Now he's still looking up at it. I'm going to go to where he's stretched out, which is right there, and then just kind of place these back into his eye sockets. There we go. Beautiful. Okay, so now it feels like he's kind of like, you know, using his eyes to help guide the way of where he's going. Even here, when we get down to that, I need to adjust their position again. Make it look like he's looking in the direction he's going. Okay, same thing here. Lots of keyframes at this point because we just have this spot where, you know, the pupils are in this transitional point. Now here he's looking cross-eyed all of a sudden. Both of them in the same direction. I just have to adjust the 1. So sometimes you get that. There we go. Squash, let me go to the stretch point, which is right here, and then lift those up, slide them in. There we go. Just make sure that they're set inside there. Okay. So I would just go through the entire thing, do the same exact process over and over and over again for that. Now I'm going to jump back to pretend that that's all done. Okay, and I'll go back to here, and then I'm going to work on my feathers, which are right there. So in this case, I have several different feather controls. I have one for all the feathers, which is this one, and then I have these other ones, which are individual controls. So I'm going to use the individual ones. I'm not really going to use the all feathers one, so I think I can get a lot more realism using this. Okay. So here he is. Okay. I do have also, where is feather position? There we go. So feather position I'm going to do first. So I just want to make sure that, you know, his feather isn't sticking up above his head. So here it's good, so I'm just going to set a keyframe. I'm going to use I can use J and K on my keyboard, and then just go and adjust that. I think I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to jump to every high spot here and hit U again on this key so I can see all the keyframes, find feather position, and then just set that keyframe every time he's at his midpoint. And you'll eventually be able to look at your keys and see, like, this is my midpoint, because it's just the single keys there and there's not a whole lot happening. So it's very obvious for me to see those. Right there, same thing. Okay. So now I can just go back and just adjust. Really the Y position is the only one I need to adjust. Everything else should be good. Oops. And I could definitely let After Effects do a lot of the interpolation for me. But it could also lend it to have just a little bit more softness by me kind of going more of a frame by frame motion. Okay, you'll notice I'm not going frame by frame, I'm actually just going keyframe by keyframe. That's the only time that it's really changing. We're just hitting those extremes, and that's what is going to be our indicator as to where this should be. All right, so that's good. So now we hit play, and now they're all in the right spot. Cool. Now I'll go into feather rotations here, and I'm going to kind of sync these up to his rotation. So as he like rolls back, I'm going to have my feathers kind of roll back as well. Okay, so let's go to this. Alright, so now he's going to go back like this. So I don't want his feathers to go backwards at this point. I'm going to have them go slightly forwards. So just scoot that forward. And now when he goes here, I'm going to pull it backward. Okay, so now let's see. Let me jump into my bird. I'm just going to change the color of those a bit. Or actually, I can just do it here still. Let me unshy guy. Let me grab my vanilla bird. Unlock that. And shy guy it again. There we go. I think I'll turn the quality up back to full. Alright, so let's see what that looks like. There we go. Now it looks weird because it's sticking there. It really should be as far back as it's going to go. That's as far back as it should be. And then right when he hits the ground here, like right when he goes, that's when it's going to flop forward again. Okay, so I'm going to go to right about there. Let's hit U again on this so we can see the feather. I'm just going to drag all of these all the way down to there. That way the feathers just gradually go back, and then once he hits, we'll have them flop forward again. There we go. And then the same thing, once he gets all the way, over here again, it'll be pulled back to that side. And then we'll have the same kind of setup here. So there he is, hits the ground, feathers flop. Actually, let me go to the one after it. I'm going to give a little bit of time to transition into that floppy area. And then when we get over here, that's when it'll be all the way back. Alright, so now let's take a look. Okay, now they look really stiff, like they're still all kind of part of the same cluster. I didn't do the last couple. But what I can do is if I just grab the, let's say, middle ones, I just offset these a couple frames, and I grab the back ones and offset these a couple frames, we'll get something that's going to appear to have a little bit more motion. We'll really see it when we get to those spots, where we see some quick motion on those. Okay, so let's watch it back in real time. There we go. And maybe 2 frames was too much. Let's pull that back to 1 frame and 1 frame. There we go. So it feels like they have a little bit more life to them than obviously they did a few minutes ago. Okay, and obviously we can spread them apart, whatever we need to. His tattoo shape I'm not really going to animate. I think that's just like, you know, what I want his tattoo to be. I think 1 was probably actually a good one. I like the circle on there. I do have the beak open, so let's do some beak animation here. I do have the angle one, which I'm not going to use because I have the checkbox one set up for him. So let me just rewind this a little bit. And I'll just do a little bit of animation on here. Just oops, I have to set keyframes. There we go. Set that. And these will jump, so there's not going to be a transition, it'll just jump into that pose. So this is kind of like he's just talking to himself before he jumps. I think right here I'll add U so we can see where our keyframes are. Yeah, I'm going to take this keyframe here and just copy it. And then when he goes like that, then he's going to open his mouth again. He's excited. And then we'll do, I like to always sync it with something, so let me copy this. And then go up another frame and then close the beak. That way as he's like hitting the ground, it's like slapping his beak closed. There it goes. Cool. And then obviously his beak position needs to be updated too. I really noticed it right there where it's like super close. So again, we have this beak position. It would jump back to here. This is good. Beak position. I'm going to go to all the high points again and just reset that keyframe. And then just jump back again and then adjust the Y of it down. You see, once you start setting some keyframes, it really does become this repetitive process of just kind of like doing the same thing. We did the same thing for the pupils, same thing for the feathers, same thing for the beak. And then you're doing it for every single time this character would jump. All right. So again, I didn't do the whole thing just because you don't need to see all of it. But oops, let's watch the beginning of this. There we go. Okay, so as far as the animation part is concerned, it's done. We have animated the bird, we've animated the background, we've animated our camera, we have parallax going on. Well, we do want to add some sound effects, so I would want to go out to a sound effects site and find some cool sound effects. Let me see where my camera ends. Right there. Okay, I'm going to trim my comp to the work area. I'm going to go a little bit more. Just want to give myself a little bit more room. There we go. I'm on Shy Guy. I'm going to turn on motion blur for the things that need motion blur. My foreground and stuff isn't motion blurred. It's not animated, but I would put motion blur on it. That way when the camera's moving, we still get that. I hit play, but I think it's thinking still. Yeah, let's go here. There's my birds in the background. And I could always adjust to some of the lighting. Right now everything's kind of flat colored. I definitely want to adjust the coloring on these mountains back here and the hills there. Maybe kind of pull up some of this, make this a little bit more apparent, and kind of knock these back some. Alright, that motion blur is just killing it. Let's go up a bit like this. Let's get a good action frame of the bird bouncing. There it is. Alright, nice motion blur on them. Nice. Alright, I'm going to turn that off for now. Dun, 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 dun. I don't need that. What am I looking for? Oh, my background's here. Okay. Let's go to mountain range. And this is where I'm going to do more of the creative stuff of getting this thing lined up with what I want it to look like. So some things you can do tints to things. So if you just wanted to tint something, you can just say I want to tint the blacks to be, let's say, dark blue, like that. Okay, now this is my mountain range, which is right there. Not a whole lot of black. Let's go to the white. Slide to the blue range. You can see how we can then tint these ones to be like there. Okay, so that'll actually remap your colors for you. Obviously, other ones we've used, color correction or hue and saturation we've used plenty of times. Change color, change to color, obviously change color. So you're picking a color. So you can eyedrop, let's say that, and then transform that color. I need to probably put some darkness. Oh, there it goes. Take the lightness down. And I can slide that over, and I can change the color there. I prefer to use hue and saturation for that. That's a really specific kind of tool. For what I want to do, I think I'm just going to go to hue and saturation, and then just take the lightness up or down. There we go. So it kind of blends in with the background. Maybe pull some of the saturation. So I'm going to grab this and do it to the other mountain range. And just give it a little bit of a different taste to it. My single mountains, I'll bring them closer to where they were, but definitely not as much. Let me copy this new one now and then go to the other ones and paste that. There we go. Let's go to my hill range. And I have a couple hill ranges here. And you'll see it already darkened that one, which again gives it a little bit more pop from the rest of it. Maybe I'll tint this color a little bit more. There we go, different color. Here's my individual hills. Definitely pop those. Let's zoom out some. I think I'm hitting one that I'm not even seeing. Let's copy that. And I'm just sliding and just kind of adjusting these so they're not all the same exact shade. Actually, I do want them to be in the green. I'm not sure why I picked blue in that other one and just kind of left it. And then hill 4, let me just copy this one. Cool. And our clouds can stay white, that's fine. And then my foreground, I'll paste it and then bump that up some. Okay, so not a huge difference between the initial one and this one, but definitely a noticeable difference. If you looked at the previous one and this one has a lot more brighter colors closer to the camera, dimmer colors way out in the back, more desaturated. I think that's foreground 1. Let's darken that some. There we go. And just to give it some real color differentiation. Slide that there. And there it is. Much nicer than obviously the previous stuff without any of the fanciness. All right, so last steps. I'm going to go to my background scene, which is under my comps. There it is. Drag this into a new comp. I like to take this and then do my my sound effects in here. That way everything's kind of flattened out. So I don't have all the other layers there. So it makes it a bit easier to see and to create those types of things. So eventually I'll do that. Once I finish up my other stuff, I'll get that all situated. Other stuff, just kind of finishing touches, maybe adding vignettes, that kind of stuff. So I'll switch this to multiply. And you should have seen me do this a million times. And I don't really change the method that I do this. It's just kind of, I like to take the background image because it gives a little more depth. If I do have sound on this one, I need to make sure that it's only on one of these and not both, because that will cause some issues. There we go. Maybe even adding an adjustment layer, adding a photo filter, and then maybe a cooling filter. Oh, that orange might be cool. Then let's see about doing some curves to this. No, I want that one. There we go. So there it is without and with. Definitely see a little bit more pop inside of there as well. One more thing I'll show inside of our other comp. In this 3D comp, you can add lights. If you don't know what you're doing with this, it can cause more trouble than it's worth. I'm going to leave these as point lights. I'm going to set this to smooth, cast shadows, okay. And we'll see everything gets dark because now I have a light. And this light is what's causing things to be illuminated. So if I switch to top view, there's the light. There's my items. Let's just drag this closer. Okay, I can kind of see some stuff. I'm going to double click. I'm going to take the intensity way up. Okay, the birds are really bright. Let's go to fall off distance and make that even bigger. There we go. So now we're getting my bird. We're getting the rest of the scene, and now we can pull this down some. There we go. And then you'll see what it does is it just kind of creates this light, which is then lighting up our scene. And as we adjust where the light's positioned, we'll get different effects where it's lighting up different things. Something we have to be concerned about is when we get down here, well, now it's really dark because we don't have a light down there. So if I were to duplicate this and then slide it down, and then take the intensity down, let's say 90. Okay, so now he should be lit up pretty much for the entire time. Obviously we've lost some of the background stuff, so we'd have to again play with the lighting some more. I just want to introduce it, nothing we have to do. But one of the cool things with this is if I go to my hill, now that it's 3D and we have some lights, I can actually tell things to cast shadows. Yep, so all clicked on. And so now you can see we have shadows. So this could give it, again, kind of like a different look, make it feel a little bit more, you know, it's not 3D, it is 2.5D, but we can get that look of feeling like it has some sort of thickness to it or some sort of bigger dimension. I'm getting some weird thing right there. I think it's just because we're on the same layer. Hill range is right here. Yep, so let's go to its position. I'm just going to adjust it slightly. Yep, there it goes. Okay, so again, something you could do, I'm going to leave these lights off. Once I turn them off, it goes back to my default. Oops, turn the foreground off. Okay, just something to kind of show you that as well. Let me turn these back on and go look at the end background scene. Right, so again, you get some cool effects with it. We'll talk more about those things later, but right now we don't need to worry about it too much. Okay, So once you have your sound effects, once you have your final item here all set up, ready to go, how you want it to look, you'll bring in your title card, you'll drag your title card and this final comp, which I'm just going to rename Animated Scene Final. I'll drag that and my title card into a new composition, make a transition between them so it flows nicely. We don't want to ever offset any of our layers here, or definitely not inside here. If I offset my, let's say, bird controller layer, even though it's way down here, you'll see that none of the things are moving with the bird now. Like I've totally screwed up the entire thing. Okay, so you just want to be careful with that. Redo name change. Cool. You'll make that into a movie, turn in all your stuffs. All right. So that should take you all the way through the end of your Parallax assignment. It'd be interesting to see what comes out of these, and have fun.